I've been thinking more recently that most relationships, the success of most relationship comes down to this idea of like how good you are at conflict resolution. Because I've had a previous relationship where we both can take the blame per se. We were just not good at conflict resolution. And then I've had a more recent relationship where we seem to be much better, not perfect, but much better at conflict resolution. And it makes all the difference.
But I think, Stephen, it's not, if you were bad at conflict resolution, it's not just your fault. It's partly the way our society works. Come back to the idea of romanticism, right? Romanticism gives us this extraordinary idea that love is something that should be felt and communicated without words, right? So the most romantic the most romantic sentence that often people will say is, I met this person and we didn't even need to speak. We just felt on the same page. Everyone goes, oh, how romantic, ding, ding, danger. Because it's, this leads to a catastrophic outbreak of sulking, right? What is sulking, right? What is a sulk? A sulk is a fascinating pattern of behavior where you get very angry with someone because they have not understood you even though you haven't said anything, they've not understood you, and you get offended because you're a romantic person, you think they can't possibly love me, because true love means understanding somebody, intuitively, wordlessly. And therefore, I'm not going to speak. And so, you're coming back from a party with your partner, and they say to you, "Is anything wrong, darling?" And you go, "Mm-mm." Of course there is, but you're not going to tell them. And then they start saying, "Come on, you can tell me what's wrong." And the sulking person goes, "No." And this can go on and on and on. I mean, we've all been at it sometimes. You go home, you go straight upstairs, you go to the bathroom, you shut the door, and then your partner's kind of knocking at the door, going, "Please, darling, just tell me what's wrong." And you go from behind the door, "No." And the reason is that you're a romantic, and you believe that your partner should have miraculous, almost alien capacities to look through the bathroom door into your gnarled and wounded soul to understand what the upset is. But of course they can't, because they're just human. It takes us a long time to realize that other humans are not mind readers. One of the first things we should always ask is, have I told them this? I know I'm upset, but did I tell them this? And so often the answer is not quite, because we're romantics. And so we have to do that really, we can accept it's really boring. We've got to use words. We've got to painfully stack up words and go, the reason that I'm getting a little tetchy is because, and you've got to explain yourself. It's not very romantic, but that is normally a sign it's a good idea.
So honesty, I've struggled at times to be completely honest in my relationships when I felt like the honesty might hurt them. So can we have true love and total honesty?
I believe that the wish to tell someone absolutely everything is both beautiful and ultimately utopian in a problematic way, because all of us have within us ambivalences, doubts, unfaithful thoughts, etc. And it isn't the work of love to rub your partner constantly up against the most troubling, disturbed sides of your psyche. Now, we're not talking, this is not an advocacy for sort of total mendacity and lies, but it is an advertisement for editing. We should hope that we don't meet the fullest version of each other all the time. I know it sounds romantic, but sometimes it's, as parents know, is it that great as a parent to tell your child absolutely everything about what's going through you? Or sometimes, is there a role for saying, I'm just going to edit myself, not in the name of subterfuge or deceit, but in the name of love, that love could be compatible with an editing of certain aspects of your reality.
Let's talk about romantic love. What is that?
Well, can I just first start by saying we're a bit confused about it? And so I can't give you an immediate answer, but I want to register that not just me, but the whole of the current world is confused about love. And I think we've been confused for about 200 years. And let's go easy on ourselves here, because the way in which we approach love now is a never before approached philosophy. For about the last 250 years, we've been loving under the aegis of a philosophy we could call romanticism. And romanticism is a vision of love with very particular assumptions. Let me run through a few of them. There's one soulmate for everybody. You're going to find this soulmate. You're going to find them through slightly mysterious ways, possibly through almost quasi-divine, like you'll feel pulled. You'll meet them at the supermarket checkout line, the nightclub, and without even knowing too much about them, you will sense that they're your destiny. So you'll feel impelled towards somebody that you don't necessarily know too much of. A force will pull you, and you will feel this is the one. And they will be an angel, literally a sort of descended being from another world. The Romantics were very, very keen on the notion that you didn't have to know someone too well to understand them. Even speaking not very much, the connection will be even deeper. The Romantics also thought that love and sex absolutely belonged together, and that you couldn't have a millimeter of disjuncture between the two. Love and sex had sometimes drifted apart in the old world, and that had been sometimes a problem, but it became a tragedy. So adultery moved from a difficulty to a tragedy. That's why all modern novels and films are all about the tragedy of adultery. So look, these are some of the difficulties that the modern world has created. We tend to believe nowadays that love is an emotion that we should feel, never a skill that we should learn. For example, if I said to you, we should probably study love. We should probably go to a school of love. You go, that's not very romantic. Now, every time that someone says, that's not very romantic, ding, ding, that's normally a sign of a problem. Like most things that don't sound very romantic are a good idea, and most things that are romantic, like marrying in Vegas after you've met someone for 5 minutes, is not so great. Now, what are we getting wrong? One of the things we're getting wrong is this whole business of instinct, right? So we tend to believe that love will pull us instinctively towards marvelous people that will be correct for us. The old world, people were set up in relationships. You'll marry this person because of this reason. That person goes well with my family, blah, blah. In other words, nothing to do with you. You're put together with somebody. Nowadays, we're nominally free to choose anyone. Hooray, fantastic. Aren't we going to make great choices? No. Why don't we make great choices? Because we're not free. Why are we not free? We need to go to a psychotherapist to tell us why we're not free. We're not free to love just anyone. We love in tracks laid down for us by our childhoods. Adult love sits on top of tracks and a script laid down for us in childhood. You might go, what's the problem with that? So what? Well, what's problematic is that many of us had childhoods in which affection was mixed in with more problematic dynamics. That maybe in order to derive love in childhood, we also had to encounter somebody who was in a rage, someone who was violent, someone who was depressed, someone who put us down, someone who preferred another sibling, whatever it was. And we go into adulthood and we find that we're drawn to love stories that feel familiar because they're echoing some of childhood dynamics, but they don't necessarily, for that matter, lead to happiness. And, sometimes we have situations where you set up a friend, let's say. You got a really good friend and another friend. You think those people would really go well together. You set them up on a date and then you call them up afterwards. You say, so how did it go? It must have gone really well. They say, I'm not sure. Maybe something was lacking, a little spark. What they're really trying to get at is, they're not going to put it this way. Your friend, this date, did not show me signs that they would make me suffer in the way that I need to suffer in order to feel I'm in love. In other words, this relationship threatened to be happy. That's why I had to go away. So we are paradoxical creatures because our past was not necessarily happy. We're not necessarily that happy that our future romantic lives should be happy either. And this is something that, they weren't thinking about that when love was reinvented 250 years ago.
When people say they have daddy issues and things like this, are you saying then that there's often truth in that because they had an early experience with a father figure, a male figure in their life that might have left them or might have, created a anxious attachment style or something. So they then end up pursuing dysfunctional men and relationships because that's the suffering that they associate with love.
Sure. I mean, we repeat what we don't understand. And so long as we're unaware of the stories that we've grown up with, we will enact them in our adult lives. So we're not compelled to do this forever. But, and look, I think a lot of us have a desire to give the stories of our childhood a different ending. Our father might have been a distant and, mean-spirited creature, but also had some good qualities. The dream is to find somebody a bit like that, but to make sure that the story has a good resolution. So it's not merely a desire to repeat, it's a desire to repeat and give a better ending. But frequently, we don't get there. And I think that, look, the thing about psychology is we see all around us people doing so-called crazy things, falling in love with people who are not going to make them happy, sabotaging their careers, not able to open up to people. And we think we can step back and go, why are they doing that stuff? What's going on? Now, one way to look at it, and it's a kind of compassionate way to look at it, a lot of the stuff that looks crazy now once made a lot of sense. It was once probably a really clever thing to do. If you were growing up, let's say, in an environment in which, let's say a parent was suicidal, right? A parent was suicidal, and you shut down your emotions totally and decided you would never trust anyone. Fantastic. That's a fantastically clever thing to do when you're 5 years old and you've got a suicidal parent, right? Because that will get you through to the next stage of life. If you open your heart at 5 and there's a parent who's suicidal, it'll tear you apart. So good for you. You're doing something brilliantly clever, right? Or imagine somebody who becomes a clown as a child because there's a very sad atmosphere and there's a depression, and all they can have time for is jokes. They're just a manic joker, right? Brilliant. What a fantastic thing for a kid to work out, that they need to be quite a kind of manic joker. But what happens 10 years later, 20 years later, 30 years later, is that what used to be a fantastic defense against an intolerable situation has turned out to more or less ruin people's chances, because the person, with that difficult father will end up never being able to open their heart to anyone, even a very safe person. They won't even know their heart's closed, but they will be acting out the same defensive strategy. Or the person who, it was a great idea to be a bit of a joker early on, but now they have no time for anything serious and their friends feel that they're a slightly plastic person, can never connect with them. That's a real toll in the adult world. So, very often what we need to do is to say thank you to our younger selves for having devised strategies that really were clever, but at the same time say, thank you, it's enough. I want to live in a different way. That was a fantastic strategy then. It may no longer be the right way for me to live now.
If you love the Diary of a CEO brand and you watch this channel, please do me a huge favor. Become part of the 15% of the viewers on this channel that have hit the subscribe button. It helps us tremendously, and the bigger the channel gets, the bigger the guests.